Hi everyone, and welcome to Beyond Belief with Nuria Khan. Today I'd like to just do a quick video stating the absolute bloody obvious, but I think it has to be said again because a new report has just come out stating that the grooming gangs was not uniquely a ethnic problem, it is a religious problem. A point that you think would have been hammered home many a time by now, but apparently this is news to people. So let me show you what the current news was and why it is so redundant, because it's obvious this is an Islam problem. So let's go through some of these videos together. So this was a video on GB News during Patrick Christie's, and Lee Harris posted it on X, which made me wake up to the fact that this was apparently mind-boggling news, which it shouldn't be. But here we go. I will play it for you all.
Good evening. Now, before I start, I just want to give a warning that the content of this might be a bit distressing to some viewers and listeners. Should the Pakistani rape gang scandal actually be called the Islamic rape gang scandal? According to a new report conducted by an expert on Islamic studies, well, it sets out several key aspects of the Islamic faith that he claims explains the phenomenon of groups of some Muslim men raping mostly white girls, some of which may well obviously be disputed by Muslim groups. But these are the doctrine of the superiority of Muslims over non-Muslims, the doctrine of loyalty and disavowal, also known as love and hate for the sake of God, the superiority and dominance of men over women, the mandated seclusion of women by men, the religious practice of forced marriage and the lack of a concept of an age of consent, the perceived threat of dangerous female sexuality, the practice of sex slavery as an aspect of the laws of jihad, and dihimitude and the treatment of conquered non-Muslim peoples in Islamic laws. Now, this report claims that while Pakistani men are overrepresented in the grooming gang convictions, the overall proportion of Muslim perpetrators is even greater. And this is backed up by a powerful, extremely distressing testimony from a rape gang survivor, Ella Hall, which is not a real name. She testifies that her abuse was racially and religiously aggravated. She was raped because of her race and religion, and her rapist told her while she was being raped that this was happening because she was white and because she was a Christian. And during rapes, she was verbally abused for being a non-Muslim. Now, I'm going to read to you now a little bit of Ella Hill's testimony. This was provided to the J Inquiry in 2019. Now, again, this might be a bit distressing to viewers and listeners. She says, I was told that to show them respect, I mustn't eat pork. I was told that Muslim girls are good and pure and they stay virgins until marriage, but all white girls are slags and they all sleep with hundreds of people. I was told white girls are trash. They're all whores. They are lower than feces under your shoe. They don't obey Allah, so they deserve to be punished. They don't dress modestly. Muslim women are pure because they cover down to their ankles and down to their wrists, and the hem of their top comes down below their knees. White girls show the curves of their body, so they are asking for it. They should be raped as punishment for not obeying Allah. Sex with a kafir, which is a non-believer girl, doesn't count as adultery. They believed they had a position of religious moral superiority over non-believers. They believed it was their duty to punish us, as they believed that doing so made them good Muslims. This is what they were taught by their mothers. I was told that in Islam, if a girl or woman looks at a man who isn't her brother, father, or her husband, then that means she wants to have sex with them. So I was told to look at the floor when I was around Muslim men. So when I did look at a waiter in a restaurant, I was then taken away to be gang raped as punishment. I was told that according to their faith community, girls are old enough for sex when they start their periods at age 11. All of the sexual abuse that I experienced was linked to spiritual abuse or religious abuse. Religious scriptures were used as tools of control to force me to conform to their will. The report goes on to paint an apparent pattern of sexual abuse perpetrated by some men of the Muslim faith. For example, in 2021, the BBC actually reported that as many as 1,000 non-Muslim girls, so Christians, Hindus and Sikhs, are abducted each year in Pakistan and forced to convert to Islam and then marry their abductors. The concern here, of course, is that if they can be justified by aspects of the religion of Islam in Pakistan, then is that something that some people of Pakistani heritage might bring with them here to the UK? There's also marriage trafficking. In 2009, Home Office statistics reported that 90% of victims of forced marriage in the UK were Muslims. They were, in many cases, taken to Muslim countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Somalia, and Afghanistan. Now, the report outlines several recommendations about how to deal with the issue here in Britain. They say, fears of stoking Islamophobia should not be allowed to scuttle transparent investigation of the grooming gang's religious cultures. The religious identities of both perpetrators and victims should be rigorously recorded. Police should be trained to interview grooming gang suspects concerning their religious beliefs. Police should also be trained to investigate the religious aspects of the testimony of the victims. The state should enforce a legal prohibition of unregistered Sharia marriages. The role of abusers' family members in enabling abuses must be considered. That is a very important factor, I think. Islamic religious leaders should be called upon to disavow the activities of grooming gangs, as well as certain religious beliefs which have enabled grooming gang activities. Politicians should refrain from making dismissive but ignorant claims concerning what Islam does and doesn't teach about human sexual relations. It must be publicly acknowledged that there are Muslims who reject the key elements of the grooming gang cultures as well. Now, the UK Forced Marriage Unit should remove statements on its website that there is no religious basis to force marriages in Islam. Awareness training should be provided to vulnerable white working class communities who are being targeted by grooming gangs. For example, the Sikh community already have programs which could be used as a model. Now, of course, some Muslims have condemned the rape gang scandal and reject claims that their faith could be used to justify this criminal and abhorrent behaviour. But based on the findings of this report, I wonder whether it's time to have a serious conversation about whether or not it is actually a small number of people's interpretation of the religion of Islam that is primarily responsible for the widespread rape and sexual abuse of predominantly white working class girls.
Okay, what do you all think? We have been banging this point home for as long as we've been speaking out on this. It is an Islamic issue. I can just show you a tweet of mine that I had put on X literally just before this news came about. So here I obviously make the point saying it's an Islam problem, not a uniquely Pakistani problem. Look at patterns across Europe. Islam historically allows this. Facts. And here, Re-Enlightenment had posted, it's almost like Tommy Robinson was right about this almost 2 decades ago, but GB News is still too shit scared to speak to him because they don't want to be called racist, which is exactly why this scandal has been going on for so long. Touché. Touché. When nobody was making the links to Islam, Tommy Robinson was there saying it's all there, read the Quran, read their hadith. So I posited, obviously, that maybe GB News should speak to me because I can't really be racist in that same sense, can I? I can be far right, according to them, but not a racist. But check what I had just posted literally before that. This is how my former religion of peace perpetuates rape culture. And this is just me talking off a clip from a long form video I'd done a long time ago with Alex Phillips for the New Culture Forum. Let's have a listen.
Sexual abuse and sexual violence that goes on. I've seen it firsthand in Mecca itself, which is the house of God. People coming from cultures where a lot of these things that I alluded to earlier, things like marital rape don't exist within the confines of Islam. Things like consent don't exist within the confines of Islam. But the issue is it goes back to indoctrination. So you've got, let's say, young men who have, absolutely no regard for a woman's body or autonomy or agency. And they think that, for example, if you're wearing a miniskirt, you're asking for it, quote unquote. Then the other side as well is that you've got this propagation of Muslim women who, again, have been indoctrinated from such an early age to think that they need to be covered up. And anything less than that is also them inviting this to happen. But what it does is it reinforces the belief that these men have, that they should only be seeing women who are covered up, and that's the only way that they can respect them. I mean, we know that even in Islamic countries, when women are covered from head to toe, there's still sexual abuse and sexual violence that goes on. I've seen it firsthand in Mecca.
Okay, so there was that one. And there's also me explaining here the very basic reason for why the hijab came about and why Muslim men view non-Muslim women in the way that they do. Have a listen.
If a woman is not wearing the Muslim veil and she's it's okay to harass her, or she should not complain. Directly, again, from the Quran, you've got a verse which addresses Muslim men. The whole Quran pretty much addresses Muslim men anyway. The verse addresses Muslim men and it asks them to cover up their women. In that verse itself, it says to veil your women and make sure they're covered so as to not be harassed. And essentially, that allows for all of this leeway when non-Muslim women who aren't covered or veiled in the same way are allowed or fair game to be kind of harassed or intimidated on the street. And this is backed up by Islamic history. And if you look into the very origins of the hijab, it was to be able to differentiate as a marker between Muslim women and non-Muslim women. And you've got Islamic scholars, one of the most famous ones from the subcontinent, Dr. Zakir Naik. He openly says, if a woman is not wearing the Muslim veil and she's, it's okay to harass her, or she should not complain. Directly, again, from the Quran.
So there you have it. It's a delineation. It's a marker between pious women and women who are fair game to be harassed. I have said this, made this point ad nauseum. I think to take Islam out of the equation when it comes to the grooming gang issue, when victim survivors have literally said that some of the perpetrators have quoted the Quran to them as they were beating them and doing all sorts, I don't even want to mention it on here, to them. Their testimonies are filled with this. There is an element of spiritual abuse, religious abuse. One victim survivor even mentioned that they operate like terrorist networks in the way that they recruit, in the way that they brainwash them to act in this way, to view these white women in this way. So it is definitely very naive to put Islam out of the frame when you're talking about this issue. I think it needs to be very much at the forefront of what is driving many of these perpetrators. We keep hearing the same tired line that this is a British problem, this is about Pakistani men, don't bring religion into it, this has got nothing to do with Islam. But clearly, the more data we get, the more ridiculous that claim becomes. And it's getting harder and harder for liberal Muslims, whoever you are. Like the other day, Aisha Ali Khan, a Labour activist, was on GB News saying, it's abhorrent that these men use Islam to justify what they're doing. Hello, read your scriptures, look into the life of Muhammad, because what we're actually seeing, and there's a new poll done by the Henry Jackson Society very recently, with the findings saying that almost 40% of university-educated Muslims between the age of 18 and 24 believed Hamas had not committed atrocities on October 7th. So coupled with the grooming gangs, we're seeing a very deeply worrying trend, especially among young British Muslims who are becoming more radicalized in their views, not more integrated or more aligned with the country that they were born in and studied in. It's the opposite of what you would expect. These are university-educated kids, not madrasa-educated kids, not people isolated in villages. And yet, their worldview is getting harder, more sectarian, and more ideologically rigid. We actually saw this play out in real time after October 7th. I've seen it within Muslim circles when I would try and sit down with certain Muslims to have an honest conversation about the atrocities, the kidnappings, the sexual torture and violence that Hamas inflicted on some of these women, where the bodies were stripped and paraded on the back of lorries and dragged into Gaza. And instead of horror, you'd get like this bizarre performance, this deflection routine, which almost became macabrely farcical. A repetition of, but do you condemn Hamas though? But do you condemn Hamas though? But do you condemn Hamas though? Like they had turned that line from Piers Morgan into a meme, but they were Jewish washing the entire ordeal, anything to avoid discussing or acknowledging what Hamas actually unleashed on its civilians, the pure evil. Some even had the gall to say rape is resistance, that these men were freedom fighters. It's obscene. Some people don't know which side they're on because Gaza needs freeing. And they blame the IDF for committing the very thing that Hamas did when they stormed that Nova Music Festival. It's just pure projection. It also is completely consistent with a certain ideological worldview that excuses violence and sexual violence against the outgroup. And part of why worldview has taken hold is because a lot of our universities, let's be honest, are completely captured by far left critical race theory. Students are literally taught in textbooks that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And somehow they think that applies to Hamas. There seems to be a profound blind spot when it comes to atrocities committed against Jewish people, particularly Jewish women. The left usually says, believe all women, but suddenly they don't believe Jewish women. I think that's because from the Islamic perspective, this anti-Semitism merges with what is already embedded within the Islamic ideology. Of course, a Muslim's default stance becomes always pro-Palestine, and by extension, it's very difficult to criticize Hamas when they're the ones fighting for Palestine. But this is where the media really screws up. These Islamic-inspired grooming gangs are not a racial Pakistani quirk that we find on this island. It's a calculated pattern. Look across Europe, it is the same story everywhere. If anyone wants to pretend grooming gangs are purely a British Pakistani phenomenon, just look at what happened in Germany. In Cologne and Hamburg, there were mass sexual assaults. The offenders were overwhelmingly young men from Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, all North African, all Islamic majority countries. And guess what? As usual, the police downplayed it out of fear of being called the R word. Look at Sweden. Child sexual exploitation cases went through the roof. Guess who the major offenders were? Perpetrators from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. Again, what's the common denominator? Islamic majority countries with strict honor-shame dynamics around women. And again, even the Swedish government later admitted that they hid data for the very same reasons as we see before. Then we get to the Netherlands. MPs raised the alarm about Moroccan and Turkish background gangs targeting Dutch girls specifically. What's the common denominator again? Both backgrounds, Islamic majority cultures. Yep, you guessed it. Let's travel further from the Netherlands to Belgium. The offenders were largely from Moroccan and Turkish backgrounds. Same exact pattern, same exact common denominator. And France, there have been long-standing issues in the banlieue with North African Muslim men grooming vulnerable French girls. Feminist groups have actually been shouting about this since the early 2000s. Once again, falling on deaf ears because of the R word. So no, this isn't confined to one race or a Pakistani phenomenon. It's not purely because Pakistani men are bad. It's simply why we continue to raise alarm bells about mass migration from cultures that are wildly, starkly different from the ones we currently inhabit. It's because wherever male populations arrive from these Islamic majority cultures that already struggle immensely with women's rights, sexual taboos, and honor-shame dynamics, and then face the pressure of not integrating in the West, the most vulnerable girls pay the price. The only reason Britain's offenders are majority Pakistani is because Britain has more Pakistanis. If we had Sweden's demographics, we'd be talking about Afghans or Somalis instead. But here's the bottom line. The ideology stays the same. Only the passport and the location of the crime changes. And that's the part nobody actually wants to talk about. Islam is the culprit. But until we do, and until we confront the religious, cultural, and ideological roots of this problem, nothing is going to change. So it's all well and good putting out these reports saying these things and asking for these recommendations, but what are we actually going to do? Will they be implemented? Will we still go to prison if we tweet facts? Will we be charged with terrorism or hate speech for simply saying what we see before our eyes? What activists, bold journalists, whistleblowers, and ex-Muslims like myself have been shouting from the rooftops since we can remember. So let's stop beating about the bush, and let's not say a few bad apples or not all Muslims. I'm telling you, the whole damn forest is rotten. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Please also like and share this video so that something as basic as this starts to settle in the psyche of everybody that needs to hear it. Because enough dancing around, and I think we're all done tiptoeing around the truth. Thanks again. Bye everyone. Till next time. If you like these videos and want to support me in my activism, then you can support me on Patreon or PayPal. Stay free, everyone.